good morning and good afternoon, because I'm connecting from Warsaw, Poland. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here with you. Let me just share my screen so that I can start presenting and show you what I prepared for today on the topic of green commemorations. So give me a moment. I hope you can see my screen. Perfect. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you today about the idea of green commemorations, which is a way forward towards new ways of remembrance in public space. But before I do that, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. So as it was already said, I work at the intersection of arts, activism, and academia. And I'm mostly interested in Jewish history and Jewish heritage in East Central Europe, in particular in Poland, and not only in the history and heritage, but how these histories and this heritage resonates in our contemporary lives, how it is remembered or not remembered, how is it taken care for. And as an academic, I'm interested in analyzing that, but as an activist, I'm also interested in changing that. So I'm a person interested in history, but very much sort of like focused on the present. And I'm connecting today from Warsaw. Some of you I've heard have been to Warsaw. So this is how Warsaw looks today. It's spring-ish already, but not as green as you can see in this picture. And I'm connecting from here, from the very, very city center of Warsaw. And obviously Warsaw is a place where history is very much present. And as you obviously know, this is how Warsaw looked like not so long ago. So the city was destroyed in great percent. And although it's now rebuilt and it looks nice and it's a great place to live, the history of the Warsaw Ghetto and the history of the Second World War and the Jewish presence in the city is very much something that you can feel here in Warsaw while being here, living here. And I live in a building, and I'm connecting from a building that was built in 1911. So it breeds history. So this is what interests me. And as it was already said, I work as a part of something that is called Engaged Memory Consortium. And this is a group of organizations, a growing consortium of organizations from Poland and beyond, mostly Jewish organizations, as my own organization that I will talk to you a little bit more in a moment, and other organizations from Europe that are focused on finding ways of making this history that we are interested in something that is relatable, something that people want to be interested and involved in. That's why we call it Engaged Memory Consortium. So we are not interested that much in petrifying things and freezing them in time, but making sure that our interest in the past is serving our future. So we're interested in past for the sake of better future. And we do that through looking for ways in which we can actually connect in our interest in the past, especially in Jewish heritage and Jewish past, with contemporary issues, with things that are of interest to people, also younger generations. And we do that through a couple of methods, let's say. So we do a lot of artistic interventions, and this is a photo of a performative monument that we organized with our partners and artists friends for the celebration of the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which was last year in Warsaw in May. So you can see average citizens of Warsaw, these people in white, being part of a moving monument, of a living monument, celebrating the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And for those of you who were in Warsaw, this is a monument that is just in front of the Polin Museum of the History of Polish Jews in Warsaw. We also do projects related with memory activism. So we are very much interested in involving people in the work that we do. So most of the things that we do are participatory. we are interested in involving both Jews and non-Jews in this memory work. And this is a group of volunteers in Wrocław, southwest of Poland, former city of Breslau, the German city before the Second World War. And these young people are marking the site of a Jewish cemetery that is, as you can see, invisible in the contemporary space of the city of Wrocław. But we wanted the site to be remembered because there are still burials there. So we want to find ways in which we can engage younger generations in remembering these neglected, forgotten, or invisible places related with the Jewish history. And this is a particularly, let's say, difficult history for some of the of institutions in Poland, or have been, because this is the history of both Jewish and German at the same time citizens of what is now Poland. Another way of working with the past is civic engagement. We do a lot of civic engagement, and this is a photo showing a workshop, one of many types of workshops that we organize, that is focused on editing Wikipedia entries about Jewish history and Jewish life and Jewish past in Poland. So we involve both Jewish and non-Jewish youth in these Wikipedia sprints where we edit collectively Wikipedia to make sure that the knowledge that is out there in this most popular resource is accurate, and it's also giving an accurate view of the Jewish contributions to Polish culture and history. And we do a lot of networking, and this is a photo from what we know first after the Second World War, meeting of a network of Jewish artists in Poland. So we were able to establish last December a network of Polish Jewish artists. And as far as we know, this is the first meeting of that kind happening in Poland post Second World War. And we do all that because we care for that past, and we want others to join us. And this is a photo of us organizing guided tours at the Warsaw Jewish Cemetery, once one of, now one of the biggest still in the world, and once before the Second World War, at some point, the biggest Jewish cemetery in the world. So this is important because the scale of the heritage and the history that I'm talking about is enormous. So in Poland alone, we have around 1,500 of dispersed burials of the Holocaust victims. And I will come back to that and explain what I mean by that, because this will be the focus of my talk. But we also have between 12 and 1,400 of Jewish cemeteries, and they are in various states, some preserved, as the one that you saw in a picture before, some non-existing or invisible in the space, and countless objects of architectural heritage. And we have 1,500 Jews according to the latest census. So you can see the scale of this heritage is enormous, and the community is tiny. So our goal is also to make sure that we involve memory activists and non-Jewish inhabitants of many towns and cities in Poland to collectively care for that past. And I represent the Zapomniane Foundation. It's a word in Polish that means forgotten. And this is a foundation that originates from the office of Chief Rabbi of Poland, from the body that is called a Rabbinical Commission for Jewish Cemeteries. And our foundation is focused on burials of the Holocaust victims that are located outside the former infrastructure of genocide, so outside the camps, and oftentimes outside cemeteries. We document them, we locate them, and we make sure that they are marked and commemorated. I will tell you in a moment how we do that. The important thing is that since 2014, we have been able to locate 300 of them, mark over 100, and commemorate many of them with permanent monuments. And we have an enormous task in front of us because, as I told you, we estimate, and Holocaust researchers estimate, that there is around 1,500 of such sites. And these are unmarked, uncommemorated burial sites of the Holocaust victims. So I will show you how these sites can look like. So this is one example. What you're looking at is a burial site of the Holocaust victims. So you can see these are sites that are not marked, uncommemorated, located either in the middle of the forest or in the field or by the road. So these are burial sites of people who were killed in something that is called the third phase of the Holocaust, or the so-called Holocaust by bullets. So people who were usually killed in close to places where they lived, or close to places where they were seeking shelter or hiding. Another example of how these sites that we care for might look: this is a burial site of 7 Jewish people, and this is a forest hideout. And I will come back to that site later. Or we often also come across individual burial sites. So this is a burial site of 1 Jewish girl that we were able to locate. And we are hoping to mark that, although this is difficult because this is located on a private property. So this is the most challenging example that we come across in our work. So these are the sites we are working with. And I showed you the, let's say, collective or individual burial site, but we also sometimes locate much bigger sites where many of the victims were buried that are still not commemorated. So doing this work, we came to realize that landscape, especially in East Central Europe, is also a type of witness and an actor and a participant of the events. And you can see here, this is the area of the former Karl Plaszow concentration camp in Krakow, Poland. This is a camp that you might be familiar with because of, among other things, the Schindler's List. So this is the camp that was pictured in the Schindler's List. And this is how it looks like today in Krakow. So you can see it's a green area in the middle of the city. And yet this is a very meaningful landscape that contains material witnesses, we can call them, of past events. And it was a territory where important things happened. And thanks to new research methods, we can learn about some of the information that are archived in this landscape. So we in our foundation, when we come across sites that we are interested in, and you can see this is one of the sites that we are working with, I will tell you what it is in a moment. So we have new research methods and new research tools that allow us to look for traces of the past. So we use GPR, ground penetrating radar, to scan the landscape, looking for the exact locations of the burials that we are looking for. We use LiDAR. This is a laser scan of the topography that show us the topography without the living vegetation, so we can see details of the topography. And you can see that it's written in Polish, but it's a location of a forest shelter, of a forest hideout, the red dot that you can see in this picture. And we also use historical aerial photos, and we synchronize these photos with contemporary maps to define the locations of the sites that are of interest to us. So doing all that, we can locate these important sites in space. And what you can see here is the GPR scan of the forest shelter that became the burial site of the people who were seeking shelter there. It's a forest hideout that became a burial site. So what we realized doing this work is that these seemingly empty places, the landscape that we inhabit living here in Poland, are places that are in fact full of traces from years ago. And to show you a very detailed example of that, this is the site of the former death camp in Sobibor, Poland. And when the archaeological research was done on this site, what was discovered is that after taking a very tiny amount of ground, you can see a dark imprint of the camp infrastructure that is still visible in the sandy surface and the sandy background. So these dark these dark marks are actual traces of the infrastructure of the Holocaust. And another example, this is one of my favorites. This is a tree, an oak tree growing in a manor house park in the south of Poland. And when I was doing a project on wartime Jewish hideout with a friend of mine, Dr. Natalia Romik, we heard a story that two Jewish brothers used to hide inside that tree. And this was something that some people thought was, let's call it an urban legend, although it was more like a village legend. But then we looked inside and we discovered 14 steps that were built inside this hollow trunk of a tree, where these brothers used to hide, and they built an entire structure inside, letting them survive in that tree. So we oftentimes come across this discourse of a void. We sometimes think that the territory that was left by Jewish communities who perished in the Holocaust is the void. But I think what we're dealing with in Poland is actually the excess of materiality at the same time, of traces of these people, their struggles to survive, but also the culture and the history. So we were thinking about new strategies and new language for commemorating these sites, having that in mind, because we think if there are so many traces in the landscape, maybe we shouldn't focus on adding new layers of architecture, new layers of development, but rather on exposing what is still visible in the landscape. And I will show you some examples of how we do that. So one of the things we do is we mark these sites, and we develop this form of a temporary marker, temporary wooden markers that we use when we locate a site. We are sure that the site is there. We make sure that it is marked immediately with something temporary before we are able to commemorate it permanently. And what we discovered is that we already produced over 100 of these markers and marked many burial sites with these temporary markers. And this is a whole another project and a long story that I won't be going into in many details now. But what we discovered is these simple markers change the landscape, and we started engaging local youth, non-Jewish youth from many villages in Poland, in participatory workshops where we create these markers together from the local wood that we can get in these villages and forests in Poland. So we create these markers together in these participatory workshops, and then we mark these sites together so that they are also part of that process of bringing this memory back. And we developed this portable laser cut device that was built for us in the creative coding lab here in Warsaw. And thanks to that, we can inscribe on these markers things that are important, the knowledge that we have about these people who are we commemorating. And sometimes we can also work with local youth so that their handwritten inscriptions are being transferred into these markers, so that they become part of this commemorative initiative, and they become also, like, let's say, co-owners of these sites. So we mark these sites, and one of the sites that we marked with such marker is a former forest shelter, a hideout that I already showed you. So we start with marking with these temporary markers, and you can see it here. It's been there for a long time. So in this site, we realized that this is a site that is located deeply in the forest. And we were thinking, okay, so after we marked it, these markers give us time to engage local stakeholders, talk to local authorities, mobilize funds, get necessary permits, and then permanently commemorate these sites. So they are a temporary structure that is there while we prepare a commemoration. But we were looking for an appropriate way of commemorating sites that are in the forest, and oftentimes these are parts of the forest that are protected. We have to deal with the local forestry inspectorate. There are some protected species of birds, for example, living there. So we started working with a landscape architect who and we asked her, she's an expert in landscape architecture, so how we can actually use plants and use nature to protect the burial site itself, because marking is one thing and then putting up a monument is another thing. But how can we use land, nature and plants and things that are there in this landscape, that in a way that the plants are planted that in a way that protects the burial site? Because we didn't want to just pour concrete into the forest. We wanted to look for a more sustainable way. So we found it, and actually we secured the burial site. You can see it here. It was fresh before it was overgrown by the plants. So we created this structure from the soil and plants that will be growing slowly and sort of like creating a canopy that covers and secures this particular site. But obviously this, like using nature and plants as a memorial, as a tool for memorialization, is not something that we do as a standalone thing. We also always make sure that we put up an accurate information about what happened in this site and what kind of people were buried there, if we know who they were, or at least if we know anything about them. So we always put up a matzeva, a tombstone, but we also make sure that we use nature to secure and protect this site. And obviously, in this case, we also collaborated with a number of local institutions, and especially local schools and local youth. So they came to the commemorative ceremony in great numbers, and supported us throughout the process. And these were the young people who first co-created this wooden marker with us. So they have been with us for a long time. And you can see here, this is part of a ceremony in a forest. Obviously, we also work in sites where there are like bigger sites, and this is a place in not far away from Warsaw, an hour drive from Warsaw, again in the forest, where 1500s victims were buried. And this is a site where we actually when we came to this site, we realized that there was a monument, but the monument wasn't actually accurate and like historically accurate. It was a monument saying that this is a site of martyrology, but it wasn't saying that it was a Jewish burial site. It wasn't even mentioning the fact that it was a burial site. It was just a monument saying some very generic things. So we decided to work sustainably in the forest and use the structure that was already there, but bringing back the identity of the victims. Obviously, in Poland, this memorial was originally created during the communist period. So certain language was preferred and certain language was avoided. So we were trying to make things right. And so we added symbols and we added accurate historical information about what the site was, but we didn't want to just build another big memorial. We wanted to use the structure that was already there and transform it into an accurate monument. And this is like part of the process. These are our colleagues working on turning this monument into something that is doing more justice to the victims that were buried there. And here, again, as you can see, this is a site that is in the middle of the forest. Or this is another example. This is a site that we also were able to commemorate. And this is an interesting case because here we had to negotiate with the local biologist and forest inspectorate, because this is a site where a very special protected species of bird is living. So we were finding ways in which we can both commemorate the victims and do justice to the victims, but at the same time do a minimal intervention into the local ecosystem so that we don't disturb the nature. So that was an interesting process. And with time, we also started thinking about how we can engage local communities in joining these efforts. And this is an example from a commemoration that we did last year. And here, local youth from the local school is taking part in a collective planting of different species of plants at the site that we commemorate. And we also engage them. And you can see that in the bottom right, in creating memory stones. There were very few stones in the area, and we told them about the Jewish tradition of putting stones on graves and burial sites. So we, with our conservator, like art historian, we created this molds. And we collectively, with the local children, younger children, we created the stones. You can see a child polishing these stones from smashed marble, and they were creating them and then bringing these like symbolic memory stones to the commemorative ceremony to put them next to the memorial. And this is the memorial itself, and the whole terrain around it is now overgrown with plants that were planted collectively with the local youth and the local children. And what that brings, what like quality, that additional quality that brings, is that through that, we know these local children, these local youth, is coming to the site, is checking on the plants, and making sure that this place is not vandalized or it's not disturbed, but rather like becoming part of this community of care for the site. And we also, you can see in the middle, we use this like markers with pei and nun, symbolizing here lei, to send a clear signal that this is actually a burial site. So these were examples of how we approach and how we commemorate burial sites that are located in the nature. But there are also other projects that we do with our partners, and this is an example of a project done by a partner organizations of ours that is called the Festival. And this organization is active in Krakow, and they are dealing with the site of the former Plaszów concentration camp, the one I mentioned already before, the one that you might know from, at least from the Schindler's List movie. So as I told you, this is a vast green area in the middle of the densely built city of Krakow, while the camp itself was established on the territory of two pre-war Jewish cemeteries. So we have many layers here of history. So we have two pre-war Jewish cemeteries and a camp infrastructure that was created there. And then everything was destroyed and overgrown. So, and now the residents of the area, very few people in Krakow actually knew about this site. At least a few years ago, still many people barely knew about the history of the site. So it was used as a park, as a recreational area, as a green area. So with our partners, we were thinking of ways in which we can actually make these people reflect on the history of the site. So we organized this. This is how the site looks. So as you can see, it can be mistaken for a park. It looks like a park. And what we came up with is we started organizing workshops and walks in the area, showing them the plants that grow there. And as I mentioned, this area was used by many inhabitants of Krakow as a recreational area. So you can imagine, people used to organize picnics there, go walk their dogs and things like that. And we found many of these activities problematic. So we wanted to make them aware of the fact that this is a very special place with a very special history. So we started organizing walks in that space, focus on what kind of medicinal plants grow there, and then organize workshops and discussions with them, talking about, these are the plants that grow there. This is a very special place with a traumatic history. So we think about these plants, and then started talking about, okay, so this is a place with this traumatic history. How would you how do you find appropriate using this space? What you could and couldn't do there? What you could and couldn't do with these plants? And this became a very successful series of walks attended by many people. So we used the nature as an excuse to actually dive into much more difficult, challenging issues. But we also realized that through that, when people actually realize that, oh, okay, so I wouldn't use this plant for whatever, some activities, because this is this kind of place, then they started reflecting on, okay, so should I walk my dog there, or should I use this area as a recreational area? And from that grew a series of projects in which we involved local community in marking of this space. And I have to say that this is a space that we have no authority over, so we couldn't do any activities that would permanently change the landscape. But we really started working with the residents of the area, trying to raise awareness about the fact that there are 2 pre-war Jewish cemeteries on the site that are invisible now. And we started explaining them that these sites require some special attention and some special ways of using them or special ways of behaving on that site. So we engaged them in the collective marking of the boundaries of these cemeteries so that they know where they are. And these are non-invasive pigments. These are, natural pigments that were used to demarcate the cemeteries. That was a clear signal for the residents of the area how they should behave in different sectors of that space. And many people actually came to the marking ceremony, like the marking event, and then we did the renewal of the marking, and this was like almost 100 people attending and collectively marking the site. And another example that I wanted to share with you is the Esther's Willow. It's a project that was organized again by partners of ours in the town of Janus, that is close to Krakow, south of Poland, and it's a project that was done in the middle of the town, where on the site where the synagogue used to stand before it was destroyed, and it was before the war. This site was called the Esther's Square. And obviously this name is long gone, but we came up together with the descendants of Jews from this town. We came up with the idea of marking the site of where the synagogue used to stand with a weeping willow. This was, and I will show you, I hope you will be able to hear it. I will show you fragments of the...
Posadzić wierzbę do realizacji. W żadnej mierze nie kończy naszej pracy tutaj i współpracy, i myślę, że jest to jakiś początek piękny tej drogi.
We are taking this route of deportation and destruction in reverse. We're starting from the site of deportation, walking to the Renek.
להודות לכם עבור המשפחה שלי שהכרתי שאתם הסכמתם להזכיר להם שהם נולדו פה ונפטרו פה ועכשיו. ואני מאחל למנהל מוזיאום שמשתתף איתנו בטקס הזה. אז אני מבקש תודה רבה לכם.
So what you can see here it's a march. Musicians were marching in silence, carrying instruments and carrying the plants that were to be planted there in this commemorative gesture. And only after the march ended, the instruments were used. So it was a march through town with local people, with the descendants of the people who used to live there, Jewish people who used to live there, because nowadays no Jews are living in this town. And this was a silent march that was going in the opposite direction than the tragic march of the people who were deported from this town. So reversing this route, marching in silence with the instruments and with plants that were then planted by the entire group. Okay, I will now stop the video and move to my next slide. So what you can see here and the examples that I'm showing are examples of the approach we are trying to develop, which is an approach in which we are trying to commemorate these sites that are located in the landscape of Poland. And this is the landscape where the Holocaust happened. And this landscape is full of traces of the violence, but also full of heritage that sometimes is invisible. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to find a way to create natural and environmentally sustainable commemorations that are mindful of the natural and social environment. And by that, we mean that we don't want to create monuments that simply just land in these villages, these towns, or these forests out of nowhere. but the monuments that are becoming part of that landscape and also part of that social environment. And we know this is very important because, us as a foundation working in Warsaw mostly, I mean, operating in the entire country, but mostly being based in Warsaw, we want to make sure that after we mark and commemorate these sites, they are taken care for. And obviously, Jewish communities being so tiny in Poland, we can't be everywhere to maintain these sites and care for them. So we want to make sure that we involve other people, the local communities, local non-Jewish communities, and that we make sure that these sites become parts of their local memory cultures. So we want them to be stakeholders and participants of that process. So this is one of the characteristics of the things we want to achieve. And we want to create these green commemorations with ethics of care in mind. And one very famous Polish Holocaust scholar recently said that we keep talking about memory, but we should also talk about care for the past. And I think this is important because care also takes us somewhere in the, let's say, metaphorically, it takes us into a different dimension. So when we think about care, we think not only about like big monuments and symbolic gestures, but also everyday practices of caring for these sites. So things that can be done by people like watering plants or cleaning these sites or visiting them, bringing stones, putting stones, bringing candles or lighting candles. So these simple gestures that are part of the everyday memory culture of these sites. And this is something that usually requires time. But when we start with these simple wooden markers and then we start developing the whole process, this allows people to become accustomed with this change that is happening in the local landscape. Obviously, we want these commemorations to be sustainable, and by that I obviously mean environmentally sustainable, but I also mean that these they can be there and they are self-sustainable in a sense that we don't have to be there to guard them, but we want to make sure that they have their guardians and that the local community has this like sense of shared ownership of these spaces. So this is how we understand sustainability. And also we want to make sure that these green commemorations are site specific. So we don't have one fits all approach in which we just come to these sites with a ready-made solution and then we just, put some already prepared type of monument there. We have some important characteristics of the things that we do, but we want to make sure that for every site we develop something that is created for this site specifically, because everywhere we have certain specific circumstances, like, for example, I've mentioned that species of bird that is protected or lives there and other characteristics. And usually, some of these sites are located deep in the forest, so they also require certain types of plants and certain types of materials to be brought there. But the site specificity is also something that is important because we really want to focus on the actual history of this particular site and the people who were either living there or who are buried there. And we really want to develop that in collaboration with many local stakeholders, because for many sites that I was showing you here, there are people who are members of the local community who still have memory of these histories. And this is oftentimes memory that is not present in the archives. This is something that is only remembered in this particular community. So we want to make sure that this is also part of the picture. So that's why we start with some smaller interventions, and then we develop these commemorative projects in a process that involves many stakeholders, as many as possible. And we also always try to make sure that we engage both the local community, the community of descendants, if we can reach them, if we know who they are. This is not always the case because many of these sites are anonymous and we will never find out who were the people who are actually buried there, but for many sites we do have some knowledge. So we are trying to connect all these communities and these groups together. And this has been proven really successful in terms of the fact that once we marked most of these places, it's the local communities or different stakeholders groups were reaching out to us, asking for us to develop a commemorative initiative together. So this is not only us coming there and wanting to change this landscape, but also them requesting to something to be done with these spaces. And this is something we are still developing, and we published a book that is now in Polish only, accessible in Polish only, but it is being translated to English on this approach of green commemorations. And we are developing a framework for commemorating such sites, such types of sites that are very different from what we usually think of when we think of memory sites. So we're trying to also promote this approach and make sure that people are aware of the fact that there are different ways of engaging people in this commemorative process. And that's it from my side. And I hope to continue talking to you and discussing the things that have been said. So I will stop sharing my screen, and I'll be happy to hear your questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Very important to all of us, and I know that everyone has enjoyed it, and I'm getting a lot of positive comments here. So here's a bunch of questions to address in our remaining time. The first is, we all read that the Polish government was really against Holocaust memory commemorations, very much did not want to be associated with death camps. So how is it that you can go ahead and do these projects so freely in Poland? That's kind of the first question. And the second question is, who is funding these projects?
Yeah, great questions. Thank you. So when it comes to the funding, I'll maybe start with that. We are an NGO, so we rely on grants. So we apply for funding to various organizations, and these are both like donors and institutions in Poland, and we do receive support from the Polish Ministry of Culture. And this was true now, like it is true now, and was in the last couple of years. So we have been receiving supports from the Polish Ministry of Culture, but mostly we rely on international funding, mostly European Union funding. That actually is our main source of funding, and various smaller foundations, organizations, donors. So we have to fundraise all the time, basically, to be able to do that work. And we, among our donors, are both Jewish and non-Jewish organizations or institutions. And when it comes for like how we were able to do all that, so actually I think this is really interesting, because somehow I think this is something that is very much under the radar. So we work locally in these like local towns, little towns and villages, and the scale is big, but you know, this like sites in itself oftentimes are like, let's say, below the level of interest of big players. So we are able to actually operate quite freely, and I have to tell you that we have not met any resistance or any actual obstacles to any of the commemorations that we did. We experienced, let's say, a drop in the amount of funding that we were receiving from Polish institutions in the last couple of years. But other than that, not really like resistance or obstacles. And what I think is important is that somehow, and this is something that is also interesting for me as an academic, there is this level of, let's say, national memory and national commemorative institutions that is very much of interest for governments and the politics of history, and somehow they ignore this like more local initiatives. And I think this is really surprising, because I think these local initiatives are really powerful, and after you can get a critical mass, this can really change the landscape.
Thank you. Tamar asks, do you ever get pushback from the local people who resent memorializing things that happened in their community that they don't want to remember, or maybe worse, participated in?
So yeah, so this is obviously clear that, you know, many Polish communities, Polish non-Jewish communities from these villages were implicated in the violence in many ways, not usually, you know, being perpetrators themselves. Also, that also happened, but also like benefiting from the violence, right? And we know that, you know, people were moving into the houses that were left by Jewish inhabitants of the town, and so on and so forth. So, so obviously this is a context in which we operate. But I have to tell you that I think there has been a significant generational shift in recently. So we mostly are welcomed in these communities, and this is important that we come to the communities where people are asking us to come. So we receive notifications from these local people, usually local memory activists, we call them. So people who care for the past of the town and also Jewish past and Jewish history. So we usually have this gate openers, right? So people who actually reach out to us, they want us to come. They are our contact there. So that's how we proceed. And we rarely come to sites where we have nobody actually reaching out to us, because we receive so many notifications that we are barely actually able to process the ones that we receive, and we receive more and more. And the people who reach out to us are mostly like three types of people. So either these are people who remember the Holocaust and the Second World War, so elderly people who want to share the stories that they know before they pass away. And these are the ones that we always respond to quickly. So if we receive a notification like that, we just prioritize this site visit. We go there, we visit these people, because this is the way in which we can hear the story, and this might be less chance. So this is one type of people who notify us. Then there are memory activists, so younger people, my generation, older and younger, who are second or third generation after the war. And these are people who are basically passionate about history, and usually local history, and Jewish history is part of their interest. And this is a very different generation, and they rarely have these like difficult feelings, and they usually speak openly. If there was involvement of the local communities, they speak openly about that. And we also have like third type, sometimes institutions, local institutions call us because they know something about the history. There is the risk of development of the area, for example, and local authorities or somebody call us because they want to make sure that, you know, that if there something is there, that they don't disturb it, and that would obviously become a scandal, right? So that is like mostly what we are dealing with. Obviously, we have had situations in which some people were very resistant towards the things we wanted to do, and it wasn't a lot. And I can give you an example. So out of the 100 wooden markers that we placed, 10 were either disturbed or you know, or taken away, and then sometimes brought back. You know, it's a dynamic situation. So 10 out of 100 were in some way contested, not vandalized and destroyed. I mean, taken out, for example, and put somewhere near, or like in one case we had actually an institution taking that away. But this is not something that is usually it's not destruction, it's some sort of like dynamic situation or a contestation of a marker. And so this happens. And also we had, I think, 2 cases in which we wanted to commemorate the site, and there was a very strong resistance towards that. And in one case we weren't able to proceed with the commemoration. And in one case that is of particular interest for me is that we had this person who had this burial site on his private plot in his backyard. And when we first came, he was very resistant towards us even being there. And what is interesting, that after a year, he was the one who called us and said, I want to commemorate this site. And now he has a matseva in his backyard, and he even opens the gate to the tours, guided tours coming. So it was interesting for us to observe this process of change that also happened. So I would say, because of the fact that we won't come to places that are not reaching out to us, that don't want us, we rarely actually have a very strong resistance to the things we do.
Right. So when we were there, when CSP was in Lithuania and Poland in 2019, we didn't know about you or this organization. So how old is this project? And then you mentioned you've placed 100 matsevot. So how many projects are you currently working on? So let's start with, when did you start doing it, and how many are you working on right now?
Yeah, so as I said at the beginning, the organization originates from the Office of Chief Rabbi of Poland, from the Rabbinical Commission for Jewish Cemeteries, and this the Rabbinical Commission has been there for around 20 years. And at some point, over 10 years ago, they realized, okay, cemeteries is one thing, but there are these burials, a very particular type of burials that are something different than a cemetery, than a cemetery. So we need a special organization. So 10 years ago, exactly 10 years in May this year will be, the foundation has been operating. And so over these 10 years, we have been able to locate, this means conduct all the field research, all the archival research, all our history and everything. So we have been able to locate 300 of these sites and mark with the wooden markers 100. And this difference in numbers it's because only at some point we actually developed this idea of marking. So now we should get back to all the remaining 200s and mark them as well. And we are in the process of doing that. And but yeah, so that's, and we are a small team. We are a team of 5 people. So this is a huge task. And we receive such so many notifications that at the moment we find it difficult to process all these notifications. That's why we prioritize always, if an older person is calling, we want to be there. And yeah, but we are very happy that this is growing, and hopefully, and the organization is growing slowly, but it's growing as well. So we hope we will be able to respond to much more in the near future. And the EU support is obviously instrumental in making that happen.
It's an amazing project, and I'm sorry we didn't get to meet you in person in Poland. We met some amazing people, and you're obviously one of them. So people are going to Poland. Hopefully they can somehow meet up with you and your organization and see some of your work. A few more questions for you. The wooden matseva that you put up. I have a friend who's trying to put up a matseva, for example, in Lithuania, and it's impossible. I mean, the Lithuanian government it's very hard. So in Poland, is it easy to put up a wooden, memorial, just to put it up there? And the second thing is, someone asked, what is written on the ones that you had showed us?
So the thing is that these wooden markers, these are temporary markers. They're not, that they're not permanently connected to the ground. So there's no permission needed, and we never ask for permission. I mean, if we are commemorating something on a private plot, obviously, but then if we are in the forest, we simply put them there because it requires one person to take it away if they want to, and this is something that does not require any permission if you're not dealing with somebody's backyard. But obviously, when you want to put up a stone matseva or a proper monument, obviously you need permissions, and we haven't had situations where permissions were denied, except for private plots. I mean, somebody's backyards, but this is a very different situations. And so the government is always, usually we are dealing with regional authorities because this is under their care. And what is interesting is we also found a way of permanently securing these sites with the fact that we register them officially as war grave. And this is something that exists in Polish law. Something that is called war graves is protected by the state by definition. So we register each and every site we locate officially with the authorities as a war grave. And that guarantees legal and also not only legal, but like protection for these sites from the state. So the state becomes responsible for these sites. They became part of these like repository of war graves. So in this case, we like at first it wasn't easy, but then we became much more successful, and now we simply register each and every site we locate as a war grave officially.
Amazing. So, sorry, what is written? What is written
Was it
on
written? Yeah. So we decided to write the inscription in Polish because we realized mostly the Polish people come across these wooden matsevot. If we put up a stone, a permanent monument, there's always some other language, either Hebrew or English or both, depending on the monument and the history and the stakeholders. But on the wooden markers, it simply says, there is a Star of David and the Pei and Nun, here lay, and then it says in Polish, here lay blessed memory Jews murdered during the Holocaust. And then there's a Tanceva. So we wanted to, we created these inscriptions, and sometimes we add other things if we know the names. As you have seen, we add the names of the victims. But what we wanted to do is make sure that this is simple and this is understandable both for the Jews and for the non-Jews who are local communities. So when we have a Star of David, Pei and Nun, and a Tanceva, this is clear for the Jewish person, that this is a matzeva. And then the inscription in Polish is for the Polish people so that they understand that this is a memorial site, that this is a burial site, so it should be protected and shouldn't be disturbed.
Great. One of our participants, Bill, has a particular question, and I'm going to give him your email, but his ancestral village in Poland is against the descendants restoring the cemetery because they say it's an environmentally sensitive area. And do you have suggestions on how to use the environmental and cemetery restoration hand-in-hand to facilitate the process? So I guess one question is, are they using that as an excuse not to commemorate? Or is it legitimate? And if so, how can you help Bill? I don't know if we can answer that right now, but I'd love to put you in touch.
I will be happy to help and be in touch. And also, I have seen, local authorities using various excuses if they really are resistant to commemorating or restoring the cemeteries. But I would say, I'm very positive about the fact that I think there is always some way out. So I hope, I will be able to help. And obviously, I think, for us, it's oftentimes easier to make things happen because when we come, we are local people, I mean, speaking Polish language, knowing how things work, so this is also, we oftentimes meet descendants of the people from these towns and villages who have been having troubles, and sometimes we are able to find ways because of the fact that we know Polish law, the regulations, how to talk to various representatives of local authorities. So I hope I will be able to help you, and I think there is a way in which you can use the environmental things to your advantage rather than disadvantage, and hopefully this will be the case.
Amazing. I wish we had another hour with you. And I think we'll have to bring you back because we have to hear about your personal story. People will find it quite interesting. Last question is, you mentioned this, but you have 300 projects. You've put 100 matzevot up. I mean, to me, what's amazing is working with the local community and with the young people. Your pictures are all young people, so I don't know if you also have older people working with you, but what amazing to get the younger people involved in this project of memory, and that really ensures it for the future and brings the memory of the Jewish community back to Poland. I mean, Jewish history in Poland goes back 1,000 years, and you're bringing it back. So I just wanted to thank you for that. So if people want to see your projects, is there a list? Like if someone knows that their family is from a certain area or they died in a certain place or were in a certain, how do they find your matzevot? Is there a website where they can go and look? And people also want to know how they donate to support you. So there you go.
Yes, absolutely. So if you go to our website, www.zapomniane.org, and I can send you the website address in an email, in a chat. So if you go to our website, you can see a map of the entire country, because we only deal with sites located on the territory of the contemporary Poland. So you can see a map and you can explore the sites that we are working with through the map or through typing a name of the village, if you know the name of the village. And you can find there all the sites that we are, we have located and confirmed. These are not all the sites that we are currently working with, because we have sites that are in progress, let's say. But and you can find the ones that have a wooden maseva, or they have a permanent monument, or they are we know they are there but haven't been commemorated. These are not all the sites we know about, but if you are interested in a particular site, you can first check our website, and then if you don't find the site that you are interested in, you can also email us and check if we know anything about this particular site. And I have to tell you that we have been contacted by some of people who came to the forest expecting that there's nothing there, and then they discovered a monument. And we have one person who is now composing an opera about his experience of visiting one of the sites. So this is the most extraordinary thing that happened. And and on our website, you can find all the information about how to support us if you're willing to.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your great work. I want to thank Shirel for finding you, UK, for bringing you to CSP. We'll bring you back to talk about more. I really want to understand what it means to be a curator criminologist, maybe differently as well. I did love the image of the people doing the art in the place that was a cemetery that's now looks like it was like paved over. I saw issues like that in Lithuania and probably other parts of Eastern Europe where the Soviets came in and just got rid of the history on top of what the Germans did and the natives. So thank you for your great work. We will be in touch with you, and I hope our people will support you, and we'll send them over to, if you need volunteers, I see volunteers, the reason they're here. They'll come and help you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It was a great pleasure. And I was happy and privileged to be here with you today. Have a lovely day. And thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you all. Thank you everybody for joining us. What a terrific program. Thank you to Shirel for bringing it to CSP, and see you all soon from a program like this to Purim. It's a very much nahafochu, I guess, a big change for all of us. So thank you for today, and everybody get ready for Purim. See you soon. Bye.